My project is titled Up for Air. And so it's kind of an investigation and a photojournalistic slash artistic reckoning on the intersection of three different communities, which is the Black community, the religious community, and the queer community, specifically in the greater Atlanta area where I was born and raised. I really enjoyed the idea of kind of creative problem solving, and especially working with not just photography, but working with sound and kind of creating a visceral experience that when you enter it, it's kind of like, oh, it takes you to a different place. And that's what I think really made it open for interpretation, which is important when you're talking about sensitive topics like religion or gender, or sexuality, or even, especially all three together, and race. When I kind of went off to school, I started to kind of question not necessarily my spirituality or religion, but like what my relationship with like God as I was coming into my identity. I tried a bunch of different clubs and stuff, and I ended up joining the gospel choir, which is actually a funny coincidence because when I was in high school and middle school, I was always in church, like constantly, like maybe 3 or 4 days a week. And I just was like sick of it. But then I was like, I don't know, I feel like I kind of want to like rediscover it, but in a way that I have like control over it. So I ended up joining the gospel choir at Syracuse, which is Black Celestial Choral Ensemble, BCCE for short. And they very quickly became my family, my support group, my friends, my homies, everything. So I ended up majoring in religion, or on track to major in religion and art photography. So little did I know I was still the same old Ericka, just not in the church, just still learning in different ways. I applied for the We Women grant. And from there, it just kind of gave me that motivation to return back home to Georgia, where the idea was, born essentially, and start to interact with the communities where I found the influence in. So visiting my home church, visiting LGBTQ congregations, which is totally wild to me because I never even knew that they were a thing, and kind of collecting stories from other people to broaden the scope of the project in terms of multiple narratives. A large population, especially in Black churches here in the South, consists of LGBTQ people who make up either the congregation, the praise team, musicians. This is something that exists, and it just may not be in plain sight. And so I felt like art and my passion for art was a perfect way for me to kind of reiterate that and bring it to light to people who I knew were going through similar situations but never talked about it. I was kind of going church hopping, it's like bar hopping, but like church hopping. Yeah. So it was fun. So I would like try to go to like 2 or 3 services a week at different churches, sometimes at the same church. I would say community practice really started to kick in when I started to have conversations with these people in these churches. And I thinking about how I partnered with the Unity Fellowship Church, which is a small congregation. All the congregation was either LGBTQ identifying or an ally. And so it was very open. We had people from all walks of life, and it was still very traditional. And so this is one of the congregations I worked with very closely with, and ended up partnering with a good friend of mine who is the creator of Black Lesbians Archive. And so we came together, me, her name is Crew Make Do. Crew and I kind of facilitated this panel where we would have the pastor, who is actually has a testimony in my zine, which I will share with you all later. Crew was a host of the panel, and so she was asking both of us questions about our upbringing, how identity played a role in our religiousness and our individual relationships with God, which may be out of the ordinary, but still 100% valid. From there, that kind of like took off when it came to community engagement, because I was able to, afterwards, people wanted to talk, they wanted to be a part of the story, they wanted to, how can I support, or do you have a website? Can you direct people to our congregation so we can invite them in with open arms? And that kind of took off on its own. Yeah, working with Unity Fellowship Church, I created these zines, Up for Air. And so when I first, I created it as kind of like my own continuation of the project. I wanted something tangible, especially with COVID going around, and now that I'm in virtual classes and I can't physically travel to Atlanta to continue the project, I wanted something that I could send to the people who are a part of the project so they can like hold something and like read something and see themselves or see themselves through other people. Two things specifically that I want to make sure that I reiterate, especially thinking about just religious and cultural norms, is the idea of community responsibility and community reflection. And so those are two kind of like active ways that I wanted to kind of redefine within context of the work. And so when I say community reflection, just thinking about creating a safe space for people, not just the youth, but also elders, um, to reflect on the religious standpoints and align within reasoning, and taking a step back and realizing how are we creating a safe space and a platform for LGBTQ identifying members or disabled members or members who are emotionally or physically impacted by their own experiences, and making it so that, you know, they don't have to worry about coming to a congregation or hearing a sermon that might um, isolate them from the church community altogether, because the Black church is a staple, not just for religion or spirituality, but for coming together, for support, for health, for mental wellness. And so by kind of taking a step back and reflecting on the meaning of a religious community and why it's important in its core, and why it's always been a staple in all communities and all cultures across the world, is to come together and to love and to inform. This idea of come as you are, like you will be accepted and we love you, and it's kind of off-putting because it's not necessarily true in some aspects. I mean, it can be, but redefining that idea of come as you are and avoiding scare tactics that naturally might push people away, and just really kind of taking some time to reflect on where we are, where we can go, and to take responsibility for making those changes and seeing them actually come to fruition and build a healthier community. And I want to make sure that people are involved with this idea of art as healing. And I think it's just so important that I was able to kind of step out of my comfort zone and tell this story, not for myself, but also for other people, and so that they feel comfortable telling their stories too. I'm young, I'm a woman, I'm Black, and I had to think about those things and how they existed apart from each other, but also together. And so when I kind of really fully embrace my womanhood, I'll realize that a lot of stuff that I have to say is fueled by the power within me as a woman, and being in touch with my femininity and also being in touch with my masculinity, but not letting that define um, my value as a woman, as someone who identifies as a woman. A lot of women influence this project. People like my mother, my grandmother, the different women who helped collaborate with me on this project. It was just a huge presence of women. Pretty much everyone that I've been interacting with along this journey um, is rooted in womanhood. A lot of the organizations are the efforts are led by women. It's very important for a woman to tell this story because women hold so much history.